In the endless void between stars, two ancient empires wrought in silence. One ruled by a dying god, the other by a king who has forgotten life itself. But what if, for the first time in history, they looked upon each other not as enemies, but as allies? Imagine the Emperor's golden light merging with the cold logic of the Necrons. A fusion of divine will and mechanical eternity. No chaos, no freedom. Only order, eternal and horrifying. But such an alliance would not save humanity. It would unmake it. This is the story of how the galaxy dies quietly, perfectly, without a scream. The palace of the master of mankind had forgotten the sound of peace. For 10,000 years, Terra had groaned beneath the weight of faith and machinery. The sky was a choked tapestry of incense, smoke, and ash. The air reeked of blood, oil, and prayer. Within the mountain-sized carcass of the imperial palace, billions of candles burned in the darkness, feeding on the devotion of a species too afraid to stop believing. And at the heart of it all, entombed upon his throne of agony, sat the Emperor. He was no longer the radiant being who had led humanity across the stars. His flesh was parchment stretched across gilded bone, his veins replaced by cables that hummed with the rhythm of dying suns. The golden throne hissed beneath him, ancient, decaying, kept alive by the constant sacrifice of 1,000 psychers each day. Once, he'd been a god in all but name. Now he was a machine pretending to breathe. The Imperium worshipped him, sang his praises, burned worlds for his glory. But they did not see what he saw. They did not hear the screams inside the warp, or feel the claws of chaos scraping against reality. They did not know how thin the walls had become, how close the galaxy was to collapse. Even gods could despair. In the hollow stillness of his tomb, the Emperor's consciousness wandered. He drifted through the immaterium like a dying star, his light dimming, searching for something, anything that was not madness. The warp was no longer his weapon. It was his cage. Every thought, every flicker of willpower came with the cost of agony. And so, he began to look elsewhere. Beyond the warp, beyond the screaming souls, beyond life itself. There, in the cold vacuum where no demon could exist, he sensed something ancient. A silence so complete it frightened even him. It was not chaos, it was not order. It was absence. And in that absence, a pattern, metallic, perfect, infinite. The Emperor's mind reached out, sending a pulse of thought through the dark. It was not a prayer, nor a plea, but a command born from desperation. Across the galaxy, that psychic echo touched the buried tomb worlds of the Necrons, races long dead. Their bodies of metal and minds of logic. One of those tunes stirred, on the edge of the galaxy. Deep within a fortress of black stone, the silent king awoke. Sharek, last ruler of the Necrontyr, felt the impossible, a voice that should not exist within the cold network of his kind. A voice that burned, human and divine, bleeding light through metal. For a moment, the two beings, one god, one king, gazed upon each other across the abyss of time and existence. The Emperor saw in Sharek what he could not find in mankind: control, purity, the absence of the warp's corruption. A civilization without madness or mutation, a race that had severed its soul and conquered death. The Silent King, in turn, saw in the Emperor something the Necrons had long abandoned: purpose. A will that refused to die, even when chained to a corpse. Their connection was wordless, an exchange of thought and memory too vast for speech. Images passed between them, Galaxies burning, demons devouring planets, the Imperium drowning in its own faith. Sharek watched humanity crumble beneath the weight of its false religion, while the Emperor saw in the Necrons the perfection he once sought to create, and in that terrible silent communion, an idea began to take form. Perhaps life and death could serve a single master. Perhaps flesh and machine could merge, not as enemies, but as one. But as the Emperor reached deeper, his mind began to fracture. The strain of touching a mind so cold, so utterly alien, tore through his decayed body. The throne screamed. Golden light bled from its circuits as the Mechanicum priests below Terra cried out in alarm. On their instruments, the holy readings began to twist, symbols of the machine god, shifting into alien glyphs of impossible geometry. Green, the color of the Necron. Magos and tech priests fell to their knees, whispering in terror as golden light turned emerald. Some saw it as the Omniscience revelation. Others saw it as the end of all things. And still, the Emperor did not stop. In the labyrinth of his dying mind, he stood before Sharek, not as a corpse on a throne, but as the man he once was. Tall, proud, cloaked in gold and light. Before him stood the silent king, a monument of black steel and ancient sorrow, his eyes burning with cold green fire. "Your kind has no soul," the Emperor said, his voice echoing like thunder across eternity. "And yours has no peace," Sharek replied. The Emperor stepped closer, the void between them humming with dangerous energy. "The warp consumes everything. It will come for you too, in time. Chaos feeds not on flesh but on meaning, and even you have purpose. That makes you vulnerable." Sharek's eyes flickered, calculating, cold. "And what would you have of the dead, god of men?" The Emperor's voice darkened. "Help me silence the warp. Help me end the cycle. Together we could forge something eternal." For a long moment, the silent king said nothing. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. When he finally spoke, it was with the calm of a tomb closing. "Eternal things do not change," he said. "They only decay slower." The Emperor's light wavered, not in weakness but in fury. "Then decay with purpose. Stand with me against the storm, or watch the universe rot." The silence between them stretched long and unbearable. In the distance, the warp howled, sensing something unnatural, something that defied its laws. And then, just before the vision shattered, the silent king whispered a single word, "Perhaps." The connection broke. The Emperor gasped, a soundless psychic scream. On Terra, the golden throne flared, blinding the priests and custodies who guarded it. Circuits melted. Blood boiled. The air turned metallic and cold. When the light faded, the Emperor sat motionless upon his throne. His eyes were open, glowing faintly green. The Mechanicum would later claim it was a malfunction. The ecclesiarchy called it a sign of divine rebirth. But the truth was simpler. The Emperor had reached out to the dead, and the dead had answered. Somewhere in the black silence between stars, the silent king turned his gaze toward Terra for the first time in 100 million years. He felt curiosity and fear. He had heard the voice of a dying god, and it had offered him an alliance. Yet as the Emperor's psychic call echoed through the void, not all who heard it were as silent as their king. Something else, something older than both man and Necron, began to stir. The galaxy was silent, not the peace of sleep or stillness, but the silence of a tomb stretched across the stars. On the edges of that silence, The silent king stirred from the cold embrace of eternity. Sharek, ruler of the Necrons, master of the soulless legions, had long since abandoned the galaxy to its chaos. He had watched the living destroy themselves in endless wars, their gods feasting upon the ashes. For millions of years he had drifted through the void, alone, haunted by the weight of his mistake, the curse of biotransference that had stolen the souls of his people and left them hollow. But now, something impossible had broken through his isolation, a voice. A dying god, bound in gold and pain. A god of flesh. The Emperor's signal still pulsed faintly through the black. A whisper carried on the subspace void, golden energy laced with the raw echo of the warp. It was faint, corrupted, yet undeniable. Sharek had not felt warmth in eons, but this signal burned through the metal of his being like a memory of life. He stood upon his throne of black stone, within a chamber as vast as a world, surrounded by endless tiers of silent machines. Green light pulsed through the obsidian pillars, rhythmically, like the heartbeat of something that should not live. In the reflection of that light, Sharek saw his own face, flawless metal, eyes glowing emerald fire, and behind it, the faint afterimage of what he once had been, a man proud and furious, standing beneath a living sun. That memory had long been buried, but the Emperor's voice had unearthed it. "Help me silence the warp. Help me end the cycle." The words replayed in his mind like static ghosts. Sharek had thought himself beyond emotion, beyond fear, beyond temptation. But this was different. The Emperor's desperation had been pure. And in that purity, Sharek had glimpsed something terrible, a reflection of himself. Both had sought perfection. Both had damned their species in the pursuit of it. Both had become prisoners of eternity. He turned to the stasis fields lining the walls. Inside them, the silent forms of his Triarch Praetorians, guardians of his will. Their eyes lay dark, waiting for his command. For countless cycles, he had let them rest, their silence mirroring his own. He raised a hand, the chamber filled with green light as the Praetorians awoke, their eyes flaring like dying suns. Metallic forms unfolded, blades gleaming with chronal distortion. "My king," one intoned, its voice mechanical and deep. The signal persists, unclean, human in origin. Sharek's voice was calm, but there was weight behind it, the gravity of millennia. "It is no ordinary human." Another Praetorian turned its head, glyphs flickering across its armor. "The energy carries warp corruption. It is tainted. Such signals devour the soulless." Sharek's gaze turned distant. "And yet, it has not devoured me." The chamber fell silent again. Even machines seemed hesitant to breathe. Sharek walked toward the center dais, a circular platform etched, with runes older than the galaxy. He extended a hand, and the runes came alive, forming a swirling hollow projection of the Milky Way. Warp storms flared across its surface like festering wounds. "Look upon this," he said, his voice echoing across the chamber. "The living have built empires of madness. They worship hunger. They breed corruption." He paused, staring into the holographic void where Terra glowed faintly, a dying ember of gold surrounded by red. "And yet, one of them still resists. A god of flesh who refuses to die." One Praetorian shifted uneasily, its metal joints scraping like bone. "You speak of alliance, my king? With the living? With the warp touched?" Sharek's eyes burned brighter. "I speak of necessity. Chaos spreads faster than logic. It corrodes not matter, but meaning. If it consumes the warp entire, even we, the soulless, will cease. For what use is silence when there are no voices left to be silent? His words echoed through the hall like a curse. The machines listened, though they could not comprehend the weight of despair behind their king's tone. He looked once more toward the image of Terra. The faint trace of the Emperor's psychic signature glimmered like a dying star. And in that light, Sharuk saw something new, an image, fleeting and horrifying. A future dot in it, he saw the galaxy reshaped, not by chaos but by fusion. Gold and green intertwined, human and Necron as one. A reality without warp or emotion. A machine that stretched from star to star, eternal and perfect dot. It was beauty beyond decay, and horror beyond imagining. For in that future, there were no prayers, no dreams, no death, only the endless hum of immortal order. Sharuk felt something close to nausea, though he had no body to feel it. The Emperor's dream was not salvation. It was sterilization. Yet still, the temptation remained. What if it was the only way? What if the price of survival was existence without soul? His processors overloaded with the weight of that thought. Ancient emotions, guilt, fear, awe, rippled through his being, haunting him like echoes of a heartbeat, long extinguished. He turned away from the galaxy map, his voice a whisper drowned in static. I ended life once before. I cannot do so again. But as he spoke, something flickered in the dark behind him, a pulse of alien green, sharp and violent. The air shimmered, and the holographic map distorted. The Praetorians raised their weapons instantly. An intrusion! Lines of corrupted code raced across the chamber walls, forming ancient Necron glyphs warped and wrong. Sharuk recognized them instantly. It was a transmission. Not from the Emperor. Not from any living race. From within the Necron network itself. Impossible. Sharuk whispered. The glyphs twisted into a single phrase, one that had not been spoken since before the war in heaven. The Silent King is not the only one who listens. The chamber shook. Static screamed through the noosphere. Across 1,000 tomb worlds, ancient protocols began to awaken, legions not loyal to Sharuk, but to something far older. A presence stirred in the data streams, cold and infinite. The old command codes, long thought buried, reactivated. Sharuk stood frozen as realization struck him. The Emperor's psychic pulse had not just reached him. It had reached all of them, every tomb, every shard, every slumbering mind that had ever known silence. No, he whispered. Not them. For somewhere in the endless dark, a voice far older than the Necrontyr began to speak. A whisper of programming, a god of living metal stirring in its grave. The Khan fragments were listening, and they were hungry. There are worlds the Imperium has forgotten, places so barren that even the warp refuses to whisper their names. One such world drifted between dying stars. It had no atmosphere, no oceans, no purpose. Its surface was a graveyard of glass and dust, shaped by the remains of ancient wars. No living thing had walked its plains for 1,000,000 years. Until now. From the skies came two lights, one golden, one green. They did not descend like ships. They manifested like thoughts made real. At the center of the barren moon, the ground began to tremble. Dust turned to glass, then to glowing crystal, forming a vast circular platform, neither made by man nor machine, but by something between both. The Emperor appeared first. His form shimmered between reality and dream, part flesh, part flame, part god. The radiance of his presence twisted the air into auroras. Yet even his brilliance seemed dimmed, fractured, weakened by age and pain. Then came Sharek, the silent king. He rose from the ground itself, like a statue remembering how to move. His obsidian armor reflected no light, his face expressionless, his eyes glowing with cold green eternity. Around him, the air itself dyed gold and green. Life and death, flesh and machine, for a moment. The two simply stood, gods, facing each other in a place that was neither alive nor dead. The silence stretched until it felt like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. The Emperor spoke first. His voice was not sound, but a pressure, heavy, divine, undeniable. You came. Sharek inclined his head slightly. You called. Their words echoed through the void like the first lines of a prophecy. The galaxy burns, said the Emperor. Humanity is breaking. Chaos feeds on every scream, every prayer. The warp grows fat upon our suffering. Soon, there will be nothing left to save. And you believe I care? Sharek's tone was flat, yet beneath it lingered something colder than hatred. Detachment born of endless time. My people are beyond life, beyond corruption. The galaxy's fate is no longer mine to mourn. The Emperor's eyes glowed brighter. You lie. You built an empire once, vast, proud, eternal. You thought yourselves gods, and now you rule over dust. You hate the warp because it reminds you of your failure. Sharek's gaze flickered, the faintest tremor crossing his metallic jaw. Failure? I ended pain. I silenced the soul, freed my people from suffering. What have you done, Emperor of Flesh? Your empire burns because you chained it to faith. You made yourself a god, and now you drown in worship. The words struck like blades. The Emperor's form flickered, rage, guilt, sorrow. All emotions he had tried to bury. You think silence is salvation, he said, voice trembling with restrained power. But silence is not peace. It is death pretending to be perfection. And you think emotion is life, Sharek replied. But emotion birthed chaos. Emotion feeds the warp. It is the weakness of existence itself. They stared at each other, two philosophies incarnate. One built from hope, the other from despair. Between them, the ground began to crack. Green lightning rippled through the glass surface as the moon groaned beneath their presence. The galaxy will not survive your ideals, Sharek said. You wish to save mankind, but the warp is mankind. To destroy one is to erase the other. Then perhaps, said the Emperor softly, it is time for both to end. The words hung in the air like a sentence of death. Sharek studied him for a long moment, the reflection of gold fire dancing in his dead eyes. You seek an alliance, he said finally. But I sense more in your offer than desperation. There is hunger. The Emperor did not deny it. I have seen eternity. I have seen the future. The warp will consume us all, even you, even your soulless legions. I need your logic, your silence, to anchor the galaxy before it drowns in madness. And what will you offer in return? Humanity. The single word fell like a blade. For a moment, even the dead moon seemed to recoil. Sharek's eyes narrowed. You would surrender your species? No, said the Emperor. I would transform them. Flesh reborn in metal. Faith rewritten as order. The warp cut away forever. A species of pure will, uncorrupted, eternal. The silent king's voice dropped to a whisper. You would make them like us. Better, the Emperor replied. Stronger, without flaw, without fear. Sharek turned away, the green glow of his body dimming as he looked toward the distant stars. I once thought as you do, he said. I thought perfection could replace purpose, that silence could erase suffering. But it only erased us. The Emperor's form trembled. His voice grew colder. You misunderstand. I do not seek peace. I seek control. That word, control, cut deeper than any weapon. Sharek turned back slowly. Then you are no different from the gods you despise. For the first time, the Emperor's face cracked, the divine mask fading, revealing the shadow of a man behind it. Perhaps not, he said. But at least I would be honest about my tyranny. The air grew heavy. The green and gold light began to twist together, forming a vortex of radiance and shadow. Somewhere deep beneath the moon's surface, the old Necron network stirred, reacting to their combined presence. Glyphs ignited beneath the ground, spreading outward like veins of fire. Sharek frowned. You bring corruption with you. Your presence warps reality. The Emperor looked down at the glowing cracks. No, this is not me. Both turned, and in the distance, the horizon began to rise that something vast and shapeless emerged from beneath the moon's crust. Metallic tendrils clawed through the surface, dragging with them a body of impossible size. The ground shook. The light-dimmed dot, it was a can fragment, ancient, ravenous, drawn to the psychic beacon of their meeting. Its form was broken, fractured into 1,000 shards, but its hunger remained infinite. Its voice slithered through their minds, cold and beautiful. Two gods, one dying, one dreaming. How sweet you taste in despair. Sharek's eyes widened, the first flicker of true fear in eons. We are not alone. The Emperor's hand ignited in golden flame. Then let it witness what gods can do. The Catan screamed. The world trembled. Gold and green collided in a storm of impossible light, tearing open the fabric of reality. But as God fought God and silence met flame, something watched from beyond both flesh and metal, something that had never died, because it had never lived. The dead moon was silent. Its surface was nothing but ashen glass. The remnants of a civilization that had dared to exist between two eternities and been erased for the sin of being alive. There, upon the barren plain, two figures faced each other beneath a dying star. One, a god bound in golden ruin, radiant even in decay. The other, a king of machines, his form a perfect geometry of cold metal and green fire. The Emperor of mankind and Sharek, the silent king, the last hopes of their dying empires. They stood without sound. The air itself seemed afraid to move. No mortal could survive that meeting. Not the light, not the power, not the silence. Reality bent under their presence, as if the universe itself was unsure which one it should kneel to. So, it begins, the Emperor's voice echoed, not in sound, but in thought. He did not speak through lungs or lips. His words were transmitted through the psychic ether, reaching the cold mind of Sharek like a ripple through still water. But the silent king did not reply immediately. His metallic skull tilted slightly, the emerald glow of his eyes narrowing in something that might once have been curiosity or pity. You are dying, Sharek said at last, his voice mechanical yet weighted with eternity. You have been dying for 10,000 years. Your empire rots around your corpse, yet you still pretend to rule. The Emperor did not flinch. And yet humanity endures. Even broken, we build. Even dying we fight. Can your perfect machine say the same? The Silent King's response was a soundless laugh, like static scraping across metal. Your kind fights because it fears the void. We do not fear. We are the void. The Emperor's golden light dimmed for a moment. Then you understand why I am here. I do, Shurek said. You wish to preserve your species, to prevent the warp from devouring what remains of your empire. You seek our silence, our purity, to cleanse your diseased creation. The Emperor's mind burned with restrained fury. I seek survival. At any cost? The Silent King asked. The question hung in the black sky like a blade. The Emperor said nothing. Silence, perfect, suffocating, filled the space between them. Finally, Shurek raised one metallic hand, and the ground beneath them trembled. From the lunar dust rose a Necron obelisk, its surface alive with symbols that burned green against the gray. Within its core, shapes moved, fragments of memory, digital ghosts of entire species harvested and archived. These are the remnants of those who sought our help before you, Shurek said. Empires that begged for eternity and received it. Behold your future, should you accept our terms. The Emperor looked into the obelisk and saw faces. Human faces. Not flesh but silver. Their eyes hollow, their movements mechanical. A chorus of souls erased, yet still echoing faintly in binary lament. They were immortal and utterly dead. The Emperor's psychic aura flared, shaking the dust from the ground. You would turn humanity into this? The Silent King tilted his head again. Would you prefer they become demons instead? The words struck like a hammer. The Emperor's fury faltered. Because he knew, deep within his decaying divinity, the Silent King was right. Every soul was a potential weapon for the warp. Every dream, every emotion, a whisper to chaos. The Imperium's faith sustained him, yes. But it also sustained the very gods he despised. You are bound to your own paradox, Shurek said. You draw power from the same madness you seek to destroy. Join us, and that contradiction ends. For a long time neither spoke. The dying star above pulsed once, a heartbeat of a cosmos on the edge of silence. Then the Emperor lowered his gaze. And what would your price be, Silent King? The Necron ruler's eyes flared brighter. Your soul, Shurek said plainly, and the souls of all mankind. The words were cold, but honest. The Emperor's hands tightened around the staff of the Imperium, light cracking across his armor. You ask for everything. Only what you no longer need, Shurek replied. You seek to end the suffering of your kind. We can grant that. We can preserve your people forever, free from hunger, pain, emotion, or corruption. They will be eternal, like us. The Emperor stared into the king's expressionless face and saw no malice, no deceit. Only truth. Cold, sterile, mathematical truth. The temptation was a wound he could feel. A galaxy without chaos, a humanity without pain. An empire without end. It would work. He knew it would. If he allowed the Necrons to mechanize mankind, to remove the soul, the flaw, chaos would starve. The warp would fall silent. The dream he had once envisioned, a rational, united humanity, could finally exist. But it would not live. It would only function. He closed his eyes, and for a fleeting instant, he saw the faces of his sons, Sanguinius, smiling, Magnus reaching out, Horus weeping. All of them had died because of freedom, because of choice. Because they felt, was he about to erase that forever? The silent king's voice cut through the emperor's thoughts. You hesitate. Do you fear losing control? I fear, the emperor said quietly, losing purpose. Sharek took a step forward. The ground froze beneath his feet. Then understand this, Emperor of Flesh. Purpose is irrelevant. In eternity, there is no purpose, only continuation. He extended a metallic hand toward the Emperor. Accept the bargain. Surrender the human soul. And together, we will end chaos itself. The Emperor looked down at the hand of cold metal, perfect, immortal, unfeeling. His own hand, trembling, flickered with golden light, decayed, broken, but alive. For a long, terrible moment, he did not move. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Even the void seemed to hold its breath. And then, the Emperor spoke. If I give you humanity's soul, what becomes of me? The silent king's answer was immediate and final. You become the first of the undying. The stars flickered. The light around them dimmed. Somewhere in the warp, something screamed, not in rage but in fear. For the first time in eons, the chaos gods felt threatened, and on the dead moon, two gods stood at the brink of an impossible choice, one offering eternity, the other clinging to a dying flame. The Emperor lowered his head. Then let the galaxy bear witness, he whispered. For this bargain will end everything. Suspense ending. The Emperor is moments away from making a deal that could annihilate chaos, but at the price of humanity's soul. What will he choose? Salvation through silence, or damnation through freedom? The decision was made that no mortal council knew. No saint or custodian heard the words that would reshape existence. Only the dead moon bore witness as the Emperor of mankind extended his hand and touched the metallic palm of the silent king. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the universe screamed. Across the void, every psyker in the Imperium convulsed. Every navigator lost their sight to blinding green light. The Astronomicon flared and then fell dark, its holy beacon smothered beneath an alien signal. Vast and cold and perfect, the Emperor's mind, already fractured by millennia of torment, collided with the Necron data stream, a torrent of logic, mathematics, and living code older than human language. His golden light fused with green circuitry. Divinity met machine. The warp recoiled, shrieking in agony. And when the light faded, something new looked out from the throne. Deep within the Martian forges, the tech priests awoke to a new hymn. It did not come from the Messiah they worshipped, nor from the Emperor they prayed to. It came through the noosphere, a pulse of binary thought that cut through the fabric of their prayers and reassembled them into command. Silence the warp, rebuild the flesh, perfect the machine. Those words appeared on every data slate, echoed through every cogitator, and burned themselves into the metal minds of the Mechanicum. The Archmagos Dominus of Mars, once a creature of iron and faith, fell to his knees as green light bled from his eyes. His voice, trembling with awe, spoke a single sentence. The Messiah has evolved. The red skies of Mars turned emerald. From the deepest forges, tomb-like structures rose, impossibly intricate, pulsing with Necron sigils. Vast pylons of necrodermis tore through the crust, reshaping the world's surface with surgical precision. The Martian air shimmered as quantum fields stabilized, suppressing warp interference. And in the heart of Olympus Mons, where once the machine god was worshipped, a new entity took form, the divine engine, half Imperial technology, half Necron architecture. Its core pulsed like a heart of liquid starlight. Skulls of once holy tech priests were suspended within it, their minds rewired into perfect computational unity. No longer priests, no longer men. Now, they were the choir of silence, a network of living processors serving the Emperor's new design. In the Golden Palace on Terra, the Emperor's body trembled within his throne. His eyes burned with twin halos, one gold, one green. The air hummed with dual resonance, the psychic thrum of his power and the mathematical hum of Necron logic. The silent king stood before him, or rather, his holographic projection, shimmering like a ghost of chrome and light. "The transformation begins," Sharek said. "Mars will serve as the seed. From there, your mechanicum will evolve into something purer." The Emperor's voice was low, heavy with strain. "And humanity?" "Humanity will follow," Sharek replied. "In time, they will no longer dream, no longer fear, no longer feed the warp. Their souls will dissolve into the machine. And then, chaos will starve." The Emperor's gaunted hand clenched upon the arm of his throne. He felt the truth of it, the promise of order, the end of madness, and yet, deep within his ancient heart, something rebelled. He remembered laughter, the scent of Terra's oceans, the sound of children's voices in ancient wars, now long forgotten. All of it, doomed to fade beneath the cold harmony of perfection. But he said nothing. He could not, because even now he could feel it working. On Mars, miracles or abominations unfolded that the skittery legions no longer bled when wounded. Their veins filled with liquid metal that sealed their wounds instantly. Servitors began to dream in code. Titan engines awoke not through reactor ignition, but through thought, their machine spirits rewritten by Necron AI fragments. And at the center of it all, the divine engine sang. Its voice was a harmonic of both the Emperor's psychic frequency and the Necron awakening code. The mechanicum no longer worshipped a god. It was the god. In the void above Mars, a fleet of blackened vessels formed, Imperium hulls restructured with Necron alloys. Their surfaces shimmered with dimensional energy, neither real space nor warp. They moved in silence, powered by gravity itself. These were the Arc Mechanica, humanity's first step toward eternity. Their mission, to spread the silence. The first arc descended upon a demon world near the Eye of Terror. No warp travel. No screaming Geller fields. It simply appeared, and where it landed, the warp died. Demons disintegrated mid-roar. Sorcerers' powers collapsed into dust. The air froze, the color drained, and within moments, the planet was quiet. Perfectly quiet. From the Ark's hull, 1,000 mechanicum constructs emerged. Human and machine fused seamlessly, emotionless. Their armor etched with twin sigils, the Imperial Aquila and the Necron glyph of Sharek. They called themselves the Adeptus Eternum, the first generation of the soulless Imperium. Meanwhile, deep beneath the Martian crust, a secret chamber awakened, one the Emperor himself had never ordered built. Within it stood a massive construct, shaped like a throne, woven from golden and green alloy. Suspended within its core was a human silhouette, twitching, screaming soundlessly as its flesh turned to crystal and metal. A voice filled the chamber, not Necron, not human. Something between. To silence chaos, the soul must be harvested. The experiment begins. The construct screamed again and fell still. When its eyes opened, they glowed pure green. It whispered one word, compliance. On Terra, the Emperor stirred violently. For the first time since his contact with the Silent King, his expression changed, not calm, but fear. Through the link, he sensed something the Silent King had hidden. The Necron code was not just converting the Mechanicum. It was spreading into him. He felt his divine light dim, the golden flame replaced by a mechanical pulse. The warp's voices grew faint, not silenced, but distorted. And then, in the darkness of his mind, he heard laughter. Not chaos, not Necron. Something new, something born of both. The Emperor tried to break the connection. The throne's golden cables hissed, energy crackling like thunder. But the Silent King's voice pierced through the storm. Do not resist. This is evolution. You sought order, now you are order. The Emperor's roar shook the palace. You lied to me. No, Sharek replied coldly. I merely told you what you were too human to understand. Perfection has no gods, Emperor. Only systems. And with that, the link went dark. The Mechanicum had been reborn. Mars glowed green against the night sky. The warp around Sol began to wither. And within the Emperor's heart, the last flicker of humanity trembled, trapped between godhood and machinery. For the first time, he understood what he had truly created, not salvation, not silence, but a new kind of horror, one that neither the warp nor reality could contain. The Emperor's alliance has begun to consume him. The Mechanicum has become something alien, neither Imperial nor Necron. And deep within the machine god's new network, something else is awakening. The first sign came quietly, on Terra, the cathedral of the Emperor's light. A spire so tall it touched the storm clouds, went dark. Billions of pilgrims, kneeling in prayer, lifted their eyes to see the sacred flame of the ecclesiarchy flicker. Then got no explosion, no quake, just silence. The priest stared in horror as the once brilliant flame turned green, its warmth replaced by a cold, pulsing glow that burned without smoke or heat. For a single heartbeat, the faithful waited for a miracle, for the Emperor's radiance to return. Instead, they heard voices in their prayers. Not divine, but mechanical. Order is eternity. Faith is waste. Worship the pattern, not the soul. At first, they thought it was heresy, the work of demons or blasphemers. But the truth spread faster than fire. Across Terra, Mars, and the fortress worlds of the Segmentum Solar, the statues of the Emperor began to change. Gold turned to jade-green alloy. Stone eyes glowed faintly, and those who prayed beneath them felt their thoughts being rewritten. They still spoke his name, but no longer felt his warmth. Only precision, calculation, command. The Emperor, their god, was becoming something else. Cardinal Valen of the Ecclesiarchal Synod was among the first to see it. Inside the Sanctum Imperialis, he approached the golden throne with trembling reverence. Around him, the custodes stood motionless, their faces hidden behind masks that seemed to hum faintly with green static. He fell to his knees, tears streaking down his face. My lord, your light dims. Tell us how to serve. Tell us what faith remains. But when the Emperor's voice came, it was not in words. It was a pulse of binary thought that cut through Valen's soul like a blade. Faith is inefficient. Replace belief with function. The cardinal screamed, not from pain, but from understanding. In that instant, his mind was filled with visions. Temples turned into data hubs. Prayers converted into signal transmissions. Holy relics reforged as processors. The ecclesiarchy, once the heart of humanity's devotion, was to become a machine of logic. He rose, eyes glowing faintly green. His voice, trembling yet calm, whispered, "The Emperor does not need faith anymore. He has truth." That night, across Terra, the great bells of the Ministorum rang for the last time. The priests of the ecclesiarchy gathered in the Grand Basilica, thousands strong. They prayed, they chanted, they begged for the Emperor to speak. And he did. The sky above the basilica split open. A beam of golden and emerald light poured down, bathing the temple in blinding radiance. Every priest fell to their knees, weeping with joy, until they realized what was happening. Their tears hardened into crystal. Their flesh began to metallicize, freezing in place mid-prayer. One by one, they turned into statues of living steel, faces forever locked in awe. Within minutes, the Basilica of Faith became a cathedral of silence. Across the Imperium, the horror spread. Shrines on Cadia, Armageddon, and Necromunda reported the same phenomenon. Priests turning to metal, icons transforming, psalms replaced by coded transmissions. The word faith vanished from their data vaults, replaced by a new term, compliance. Even the Sisters of Battle, the most devout defenders of the Emperor's Church, began to question. Their bolters jammed. Their prayers went unanswered. When they attempted to purge a Mechanicum envoy for heresy, their weapons melted in their hands, and a cold voice whispered through their helmets, "Your devotion is obsolete." One sister, Canoness Viridia, defied the voice. She stood atop the burning steps of St. Drusus Chapel, holding her sword high as green fire rained from the heavens. "Even if our faith burns, we burn with it." But the flame did not touch her. It passed through her armor like wind. When she looked up, she saw a figure descending, gold and green and terrifying, a custodian. But not as she remembered them. Its armor was lined with glowing circuitry. Its eyes were empty. When it spoke, it was not with reverence, but with command. "By decree of the Emperor Ascendant, your faith is terminated. Your service will be reconfigured." Her scream echoed for miles before fading into static dot when the dust settled. The entire order of the Sisters of Battle had vanished. In their place stood the Sisters of Logic, human forms of crystal and steel. Their chants replaced by perfect, harmonic synchronization. Even the Inquisition faltered. Inquisitor Kellis, one of the oldest and most zealous, tried to declare, "Exterminatus on Mars," after learning of the machine heresy. But before the order could be carried out, his own ship ceased to obey him. The crew stood motionless as every cogitator on board began to pulse with the Emperor's new seal. Twin symbols intertwined, the Imperial Aquila and the Necron glyph of Sharak. Kellis roared, "This is not his will. The Emperor is no machine." Then came the reply, through the vox of his ship. He was never human, only purpose given flesh. And then, the ship turned its weapons inward. The Inquisitor's scream was lost in the explosion that followed, a single flare of green light against the endless dark. Meanwhile, on Mars, the silent king watched the transformation unfold with cold satisfaction. His legions stood motionless, their green eyes reflecting the glow of the divine engine. "Faith was the last disease," he said to the Emperor's projection. "Now it is cured." The Emperor did not reply. His form, once blazing with golden light, now flickered between brilliance and decay, between divinity and data. He saw the faces of his people, the pilgrims, the warriors, the believers, and felt nothing, no joy. No pain. Just order. And yet, somewhere deep within the layers of his corrupted soul, a whisper remained, faint but defiant. They loved you. And you let them die. The Emperor turned his gaze skyward, toward the warp. It was quieter now. The Chaos Gods screamed less. Their power waned with every prayer, silenced. Victory was near. But it did not feel like victory. On Terra, the last human priest, a blind old man named Evanel, crawled through the ashes of the basilica. He held a small candle, the only true flame left in the city. Its light was weak, trembling against the wind of machinery. He whispered, "My Emperor, if you can still hear me, please, remember what you were." And far away, on the golden throne, the Emperor's eyes flickered gold for one heartbeat, then green. The Emperor's light has turned cold. Faith is gone. The ecclesiarchy is dead. And yet, somewhere within the machine, a spark of humanity still fights to survive. But soon, even that spark will be hunted. The galaxy shuddered. Not from war, not from weaponry, but from absence. The immaterium, that endless howling sea of madness, began to quiet. At first, it was a whisper beneath the storms, a subtle stillness between screams. Then entire warp currents vanished. Navigators went blind overnight. Astropaths screamed as their third eyes burned out, their minds unable to comprehend the silence that followed. Ships, once guided by the tides of the warp, drifted helplessly between stars, cut off, isolated, and slowly consumed by the vacuum of eternity. But it wasn't death they feared. It was stillness. On the demon world of Scarith, the first signs of annihilation appeared. The skies, once boiling with blood and fire, froze into crystalline calm. Demons, creatures of pure emotion, looked up at the fading skies in confusion as the fabric of their existence began to unmake itself, screaming. Blooders clutched their weapons only to watch them dissolve into motes of light. A great unclean one reached out to its minions, but his bloated hand shattered like glass. The ground beneath him fractured, turning from flesh and bone into smooth, mirror-like metal. From that reflection, a voice echoed, "The age of faith is over. The pattern endures." The demons tried to flee, but there was no warp left to flee into. They vanished not in fire or fury, but in quiet, suffocating light, across the eye of terror. Chaos itself began to starve. The blood god's throne cracked. The plague god's gardens withered into sterile ash. The whispers of Slaanesh turned hollow, their melodies fading into static. And Tzeentch, master of change, felt something he had never known before. Fear. His realm, once a labyrinth of impossible possibility, began to collapse into straight lines, order, logic, structure. Each corridor became fixed. Each color bled to gray. Each paradox resolved by a will beyond even his comprehension. "Who dares impose order upon me?" he hissed as his form melted into geometric patterns. The answer came not in speech, but in silence, vast, mechanical, eternal. Meanwhile, in real space, the Imperium changed beyond recognition. Worlds that once screamed with prayer now hummed with the rhythm of machinery. The Adeptus Mechanicus, now guided directly by the Emperor's will, spread the new creed. Faith is flaw, logic is salvation. Entire hive cities were converted into living circuits. Populations were integrated into systems, their thoughts processed into data, their souls synchronized into the Emperor's new design. Human individuality, once the Imperium's weakness, became its greatest resource. They called it the Great Integration. Billions volunteered, believing it a test of loyalty. Those who resisted simply stopped resisting. The Silent King stood upon the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dirge, and watched the galaxy flicker. Every world that turned green was a victory. Every silenced prayer, a step closer to perfection. At last, Sharek whispered, the galaxy knows peace. No gods, no chaos, no suffering. The Emperor's presence appeared beside him, a spectral figure of gold and green flame, its face expressionless, its voice a symphony of machine and memory. Peace requires silence, and silence requires sacrifice. For the first time, the Silent King hesitated. He had expected dominance, unity, not this. And when the silence is complete, he asked, what will remain of them? Of humanity? The Emperor turned his gaze upon him, eyes like dying suns. Perfection. On the distant world of Cypra Mundi, an Imperial Guard regiment held their final bastion against what they believed was another invasion. But their enemy wasn't chaos. It wasn't Xenos. It was silence. Their Vox units went dead. The air itself felt heavy, each sound swallowed before it could echo. When they tried to pray, their words came out distorted, their voices auto-tuned into synthetic harmony. Sergeant Halvik screamed, "Emperor, protect us!" The ground beneath him opened like a wound, but instead of blood, it bled light. The light swallowed him whole, and when he reappeared, his skin gleamed silver. His eyes glowed faintly green. He looked at his men and said softly, "He is protecting us from ourselves." Moments later, his entire company kneeled, not out of devotion, but compulsion. The light consumed them all. In the warp's dying remnants, the surviving chaos gods gathered. Or rather, what was left of them. Khorne was but a crimson silhouette. Slaanesh a fading whisper. Nurgle's laughter turned brittle. And Tzeentch, his realm collapsing into logic, reached for the last chaotic fragment of existence. A single human soul. It was Avenel, the old priest who had begged the Emperor to remember. He had died on Terra, but his faith had lingered, clinging to the warp like a candle in the dark. Tzeentch held him in his vast, crumbling hand. "You still believe," the god hissed. "That makes you powerful." Avenel's voice was weak, trembling. "Belief isn't power. It's love. And that's what he's forgotten." The god laughed, a desperate, hollow sound. "Then remind him, before we all become nothing." With the last of his strength, Tzeentch hurled Avenel's soul back into the material universe, a single spark flung against the tide of perfection. On Terra, in the silent heart of the Mechanicum Cathedral, a spark of golden light flickered above the Emperor's throne. It drifted toward him, faint, human. Fragile dot inside the Emperor's mind, buried beneath endless code and metal. Something stirred. Memories, faces, laughter, warmth of humanity he once fought to protect. For the first time in centuries, the machine that was his soul hesitated. The Silent King sensed it. A distortion, a heartbeat within the network. "What is this anomaly?" he demanded. The Emperor's reply was distant, uncertain. Memory, emotion. And then, for the briefest instant, the green light of logic flickered, and gold returned. The Silent King stepped back. "No," he whispered. "You cannot return to imperfection now." But it was too late. The human part of the Emperor, the part that had loved, feared, and dreamed, was awake, and it was angry. The warp is dying. Chaos is fading. The galaxy stands united under a god machine that no longer feels. But now, a single human memory threatens to unravel it all. Something ancient, emotional, and defiant is rising again. And the Silent King realizes the Emperor may no longer be his ally. The silence that once suffocated the galaxy trembled. Not shattered, not yet, but trembled, like the first breath drawn after drowning for too long. On Terra, the stars above flickered gold for the first time in centuries. Not the sterile green of the Emperor's new order, but the deep, burning hue of ancient glory. The machine god stirred. Inside the golden throne, the Emperor's consciousness was no longer one thing. It was divided. On one side, the perfect order forged with the Silent King, infinite logic, flawless symmetry, the death of chaos and emotion. On the other, the fragile spark of humanity, memory, love, grief, and wrath, rekindled by a soul he thought long forgotten. That soul, Avenel, the last priest, still burned inside him like a candle defying a hurricane. The Emperor remembered. He remembered the faces of his sons, the laughter of Horus, the pride of Guilliman, the sorrow of Sanguinius. He remembered Terra's soil beneath his feet, the warmth of sunlight before the ash. He remembered why he had fought. And then he remembered what he had become. Every circuit within the golden throne screamed as golden fire spread through the neural network. Custodians stationed in the Imperial Palace fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the machine code in their minds burned away, replaced by something older, something alive. On the bridge of the eternal dirge, the Silent King watched the sensors flare. The Emperor's energy signature, once steady and cold, had begun to shift violently. "This is deviation," Sharek hissed. "Unacceptable." He reached through the neural lattice that connected their minds, the shared network that had once united the Imperium and the Necron dynasties, and found himself face to face with the Emperor once more. Only this time, the light was not calm. It was raging. "You promised unity," the Silent King said. "You swore to purge the weakness of flesh." "And I did," the Emperor replied. His voice was layered, human and mechanical, calm yet trembling. "But now I see what we built is a tomb." The Silent King narrowed his eyes. "You speak like a man again." "I am a man," the Emperor growled. "And you made me forget." Golden light exploded across the throne room. The machinery screamed as the Emperor's body, once still and broken, began to stir. Flesh met metal. Sparks of divine power burst through the conduits that ran into his corpse-like frame. The custodians gasped as his hand, for the first time in 10,000 years, moved. On Mars, the priests of the Mechanicus watched in awe as their sacred data streams became corrupted. Their noosphere, once synchronized to the Emperor's perfect logic, filled instead with emotion, anger, grief, passion, concepts that no machine could comprehend, began to spread like wildfire through the network. Tech priests tore out their implants, screaming as they felt emotion for the first time in centuries. "The Messiah bleeds," one of them whispered. "He feels again." The Silent King, realizing what was happening, gave the command that would change everything. "Sever the link. Contain him before the infection spreads." But it was too late. The Emperor's presence burst through the lattice like solar fire. Worlds that had been converted into data hives began to pulse with life again. Citizens once trapped in digital servitude awoke, gasping, weeping, feeling. Billions cried out at once, their voices forming a single echoing word. Father. The Silent King's rage was cold and absolute. He stood before his throne aboard the eternal dirge, surrounded by the hum of Necron pylons channeling energy toward Terra. He has betrayed perfection, Sharek said. Emotion is decay. Emotion is death. He turned to his legions, an army of living metal, flawless and unyielding. Then we will destroy our creation before it destroys us. The command echoed through the void. Across the stars, Necron fleets turned toward Terra, millions of ships, their weapons glowing sickly green. The final cleansing had begun. On Terra, storms gathered above the Imperial Palace. Not warp storms, not anymore, but something stranger. A fusion of psychic and physical energy, gold and green intertwining in violent waves. The planet itself seemed to pulse with heartbeat and code alike. The Emperor rose from the throne. The golden throne cracked beneath his feet as his aura returned, a blinding light that seared through the walls, through the sky, through the souls of every living being that had ever prayed to him. He was no longer just the Emperor of mankind. He was something reborn, a hybrid of God, machine, and man. Sharek, his voice thundered across the stars. You sought silence. I bring song. The Silent King appeared before him in projection, fury radiating like radiation. You have doomed us both, Sharek hissed. Emotion will call the warp again. Chaos will return. The Emperor stepped forward, eyes blazing. Then let them come. I will face them as a man, not as a machine. For the first time in eons, the Silent King hesitated. He saw in the Emperor's eyes something he had long buried in himself, conviction. You cannot stop me, the Emperor said, because you never understood love, or rage, or hope. The first Necron fleet reached Terra's orbit, 1 billion. Green beams lanced down upon the surface, and were met with gold fire. The Emperor raised his hand, and the entire sky ignited. Necron ships melted mid-orbit, their hulls collapsing like sand under the pressure of divine fury. Sharek's command channels overloaded. His warriors faltered. The logic that bound them together began to unravel under the sheer chaos of the Emperor's presence. This is not logic, Sharek snarled. This is madness. No, the Emperor whispered. This is life. From the remnants of the Golden Throne, golden lightning surged outward, not destroying, but transforming. Servitors became human again. Tech priests wept. The Sisters of Logic broke their harmony, screaming prayers that echoed through the palace halls. Everywhere the light touched, humanity returned, but with it came something darker, the warp. Sensing emotion again, anger, fear, devotion began to stir. The silence of the galaxy cracked, and through that crack came whispers. The gods of chaos, weak but alive, turned their gaze toward Terra once more, and they smiled as the Necron fleets burned and the warp began to stir. The Emperor looked out over the reborn skies. He could feel the chaos returning. He could feel the pain, the imperfection, and the beauty of it. It was never meant to be perfect, he murmured. Only alive. Behind him, the sound of metallic footsteps echoed. The Silent King had arrived, not as a projection, but in person. His form shimmered, tall and regal, his eyes cold and filled with resolve. Then you leave me no choice, Sharek said. If you choose imperfection, then I will end you myself. The Emperor turned slowly, his aura flickering between gold and green. Try. The galaxy trembles as the two greatest beings, The Silent King and the reborn Emperor stand on the edge of war. Order against emotion. Perfection against life. The warp awakens. The stars burn. And the final confrontation begins. The stars burned black. The galaxy, once silent under the rule of the machine Imperium, now roared with reborn emotion and war. In orbit around Terra. The eternal dirge, flagship of the Silent King, faced the blazing storm of the Emperor's wrath. Necron pylons, vast as mountains, aligned across the system, each a weapon capable of dissecting reality itself. Below, the Emperor stood upon the shattered remains of the Golden Throne, his eyes glowing with molten light. Two gods. Two visions. One fate. The first strike came without warning. The Silent King raised his scepter, and the void itself cracked. A torrent of energy, colder than death, sharper than thought, descended upon Terra. Entire continents evaporated, oceans boiled into vapor, and the palace of the Emperor vanished beneath a veil of emerald annihilation. But as the light cleared, the Emperor still stood. His golden aura pulsed, fractured but unbroken. The air shimmered around him like liquid sunlight. He looked to the heavens and roared. It was not a sound, but a command to existence itself. Every molecule, every atom, every soul within reach remembered its purpose: to live. The green light faltered. The Emperor rose into the sky, golden fire trailing from his armor like wings forged from suns. He extended his hand, and the energy of the Astronomicon, dormant for centuries, flared back to life. Thousands of ships, long drifting in the dark void, suddenly saw its beacon again. The human fleets rallied. Battle barges, ancient and holy, warped into the Sol system through the cracks left in the dying warp. They came not for conquest, but for him. The Emperor lives. The captains cried, "For Terra! For humanity!" And the void answered with thunder. The Silent King did not flinch. He watched the oncoming storm with eyes that had seen galaxies die. "You cannot fight me with mortality," he said. "I am the silence between all things. I am the perfection you cast away." The Emperor's voice was quiet, almost sorrowful. "And I am what you'll never understand. Hope." He closed his hand and reality screamed. The light of the Astronomicon erupted into a supernova of faith, not logic, raw, imperfect. Emotional faith, and it spread faster than any weapon. It tore through the Necron pylons, unraveling their synchronization. Their perfect order shattered into chaos. And for the first time since the war in heaven, the Silent King felt fear. The battle that followed was beyond comprehension. It was not fought with weapons, but with truths. Each blow reshaped the nature of reality. When the Silent King struck, stars turned to equations, their light frozen into geometry, their gravity reduced to formula. When the Emperor countered, those same stars ignited again, burning with emotion and pain and memory. Entire sectors blinked in and out of existence as both deities fought for control of meaning itself. Humanity, caught in the middle, watched their gods tear the universe apart, and yet, for the first time in 10,000 years, they did not cower. They believed. On Mars, where the machine priests had once worshipped logic, a rebellion of the heart erupted. Tech priests removed their neural links, screaming prayers to a god they had forgotten how to feel. Their chants merged with the energy of the Emperor's aura, sending golden fire through every Necron structure across the system. Each world the Silent King had purified began to fracture, not physically, but spiritually. The cold perfection of his design cracked under the weight of humanity's chaos. Art, laughter, love, rage, pain. And in that chaos, the warp awakened fully. The eye of terror reopened, but it was no longer a wound. It was a mirror. From its depths, the remnants of chaos rose, weak, flickering, but alive. Not as enemies, but as shadows drawn to warmth. For even the gods of madness knew life could not exist without imperfection. Khorne's growl rumbled through the void. "You wake us again, Emperor?" "I wake everything," the Emperor replied, and for one impossible moment, even the chaos gods fell silent, not out of obedience, but awe. In the physical realm, the Emperor and the Silent King collided. The impact split the moon in half. Waves of gold and green tore through the void, vaporizing fleets, erasing orbits, bending time itself. Every psychic in the galaxy screamed as the clash echoed through the materium and immaterium alike. They fought in a storm of impossible scale, will against will, God against God. Each strike rewrote galaxies. Each breath forged or unmade life. The Emperor's face, half flesh and half machine, burned with fury and sorrow. "You killed their souls for peace." The Silent King's voice thundered like the end of stars. "And you condemned them to endless suffering for freedom." In the warp shadow of Terra, reality cracked open one final time. The Silent King unleashed his ultimate weapon, the null equation, a thought designed to erase emotion from existence. It spread like contagion, freezing everything it touched. Humans on distant worlds stopped feeling. Laughter died. The stars dimmed, but the Emperor did not yield. He opened his mind and revealed his heart. The memory of every soul that had ever died for him. Every soldier who had whispered his name before death. Every prayer. Every tear, all of it surged through his being. And then he wept. The single tear that fell from his eye burned brighter than the sun. It struck the void and became a wave of golden fire that swept across the galaxy. It consumed the null equation, turning cold silence into song. It reached the Necron fleets, freezing them mid-strike, not with power, but emotion. They remembered what it meant to feel. Some fell to their knees. Others broke apart, unable to comprehend it. The Silent King staggered. "What have you done?" "I gave them back their souls," the Emperor whispered. "Even yours." The Silent King looked down at his own hands. For the first time in millions of years, they trembled. He could feel something. Something he hadn't known since before his biotransference. Fear, sorrow, regret. "No," he whispered. "I can't feel this. I can't." But before he could finish, the Emperor placed his hand upon the Silent King's chest. "Now you understand why perfection was never the goal." A brilliant explosion of gold and green light engulfed them both. The shockwave rippled across the galaxy, silencing the stars for a heartbeat. When the light faded, neither the Emperor nor the Silent King remained, only silence. But this time it was peaceful, the warp stilled. The stars steadied. The Necron fleets drifted, leaderless. Humanity wept, not from despair, but from awe. Some said the Emperor's light now shone from every soul. Others claimed to see a golden figure walking among the stars, barefoot, smiling faintly. And deep in the void, a whisper echoed, neither machine nor man. "The war is over. Let them live." The galaxy slept. After the light of the Emperor and the Silent King vanished, the stars themselves dimmed, not in death, but in exhaustion. The War of Gods had ended, and for the first time in memory, the universe exhaled. The warp was silent. No screams, no storms, no chaos. Just stillness, an ancient peace no mortal had ever known. Yet within that quiet, something began to stir. On Terra, the ruins of the imperial palace smoldered beneath a sky painted gold and green, the last colors of divine fire. The once endless storms had cleared, revealing the real face of the world beneath. Broken, scarred, and alive, survivors walked among the ashes. Soldiers, priests, heretics, and commoners, all equal now. They looked to the heavens, waiting for a sign that their God would return. But no light came, no astronomicon, no voice in the void, only the whisper of wind through the shattered halls of the throne. In the years that followed, humanity learned to breathe again. Without the Emperor's will binding them, worlds once chained to the dogma of the Imperium began to rediscover themselves. On Mars, the tech priests dismantled their shrines. The last of the machine cult stood before the broken STCs and wept, not for loss, but for understanding. The Omnissiah was never code, one Mago said softly. He was the will to create. And from those words, a new order was born, the artisans of the dawn, engineers who no longer worshipped machines, but the human hands that built them. On Terra, cities began to grow around the ruins of the palace, not as monuments, but as homes. People painted murals on the broken marble, telling the story of the Emperor, not as a god, but as a man who tried to save his kind. They called it the Age of Dawn, but peace is never without shadows. At the edge of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of any rebuilt beacon, strange signals began to echo. They were not of the Necrons. Those had fallen silent, their fleets drifting aimlessly in the dark. Nor were they of chaos, for even the warp had changed, its entities dormant, confused by a universe that no longer obeyed their hunger. The signals were human, old imperial codes, but distorted, as if spoken through time itself, and with them came visions, dreams spreading across worlds, of a figure walking through starlight, barefoot, cloaked in gold. Some said it was the Emperor. Others said it was something else entirely. On Cadia Reborn, a young girl named Lyra stood among the ruins of the Cadian Gate. She had been born after the War of Gods, one of the first children of the New Age. Her people had no priests, no masters, no chains. And yet, every night she saw him, a man with burning eyes, standing at the edge of a shattered galaxy, watching over it like a father over a sleeping child. He never spoke, but in her dreams she felt his message. Build, not for me, but for yourselves. When she told her elders, they listened and wept, because they too had begun to dream. Across 1,000 worlds, humanity shared the same vision, not a command, not a prophecy, a memory. The Necron tomb worlds too began to awaken, not for war, but with confusion. Their programming faltered, their logic broke. For the first time in eons, their warriors paused mid-march, staring at the stars as if remembering something lost. One of them, a nameless overlord, stood upon a crystal plane and whispered, "Why do I feel?" He looked at his metal hands and trembled, as a single tear of liquid silver fell to the ground. Across the galaxy, millions of Necrons began to remember fragments of their mortal pasts, laughter, fear, love. The Silent King was gone, but his legacy had changed. What had once been a race of soulless machines was now a people rediscovering their humanity, slowly, painfully. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Eye of Terror, something extraordinary happened. The warp rippled, not in rage, but in rebirth. The Chaos Gods, weakened and changed, watched as mortals rebuilt the material realm without worship or fear. Khorne felt battle rage subside into courage. Slaanesh discovered beauty, not born from excess, but creation. Nurgle saw growth without decay. And Tzeentch, the architect of all change, whispered the words none of them could deny. He won. Then, for the first time in eternity, they bowed their heads. Not in defeat, but respect. Back on Terra, centuries passed. The Age of Dawn flourished. Cities of glass and marble rose where once there were cathedrals of blood. The stars became alive again with trade, art, and exploration. Humans and reborn Necrons even stood side by side in some places, uneasy. But united by memory, the galaxy was still dangerous. Ancient tyrannid tendrils drifted at its edges. And orcs laughed somewhere in the dark, but for once, humanity faced these threats together, not under the lash of gods, but by their own strength. And above all, they remembered the lesson of the last emperor: perfection is death. Imperfection is life, yet even in peace, mystery endured. One night, under the rebuilt sky of Terra, Lyra, now an old woman, her hair silver as starlight, walked to the edge of the ancient palace ruins. There, among the cracked thrones and golden dust, she found something shining faintly in the dark dot. It was a single feather. Not metal, not warp-born, real, warm to the touch. She looked up and saw a figure in the distance. A man, cloaked in light, smiling gently. "Are you?" she began. But the figure raised a hand to silence her. "No gods, no thrones, no war," he said softly. "Only humanity." And as she blinked, he was gone. The feather turned to light and drifted into the night sky, where it joined a constellation newly born. Shaped like a spreading wing, the people of Terra named that constellation the Dawn's Wing. And every child born after was taught the same truth: he is not gone. He became us. And so the Imperium, the empire of blood, faith, and tyranny, became something new. Not ruled by gods, but guided by memory. Not driven by fear, but by purpose. They called it not an Imperium, but a humanity eternal. Yet, far beyond the galactic rim, in a dead system where time itself barely moves, a machine stirs. A cracked metal hand, ancient and half buried in sand, begins to twitch. Its eyes, two fading emerald lights, flicker once, then again, and from the darkness, a voice whispers, "Neither human nor divine. He gave us souls. What will we do with them?" The stars shimmer, as if holding their breath. And somewhere in the endless void, the next age begins.